Hafta and good morning. The Guam Legislature is very honored to host Payu-Ta and our off-island guest this morning to discuss your deliberations over the last several days. And after you make your presentation, I'm sure we'll have some comments, but I want to welcome you to the legislature. I'm sorry, most of you, is that me? No. I'm sorry you weren't here earlier. I gave a tour of the building. We just moved back into this building a year and a half ago. The building was actually initially built in 1949 by the federal government. In 1949, this was a courtroom. And in the other room, which we'll show you, is the original session hall. Initially, the building was designed with two, because before 1949, there were two houses, but after the Organic Act, there was only one house. We became unicameral. And so the legislature was on that side, and the court assumed this side. And then we added on a wing in the back for some staff and for additional senators. And so we're glad to be home. We're very happy that you'll be happy to know that we restored all the wood that you see on the walls. It was in storage at the airport for about 20 years, and then it was sent away to have it refinished. And so we tried as much as possible to recycle and be sustainable. And so, in keeping with the theme that you're all talking about. We're also very proud of the fact that this building is the only building on Guam that is LED certified, platinum certified, which is the top that you can possibly get. There are other buildings that are silver and gold, but this is the only building that achieved the platinum designation because of the other things that we put around it. The water that comes off the roof is stored, and then it comes up to water the plants. We haven't figured out how to make it come back into the building to do things for other functions, but at least it keeps our grounds. And though those are the original louvers from 1949, somehow they managed to arrange so that you can now do it by remote control. So they open and close with the sun, and as we walk around the building, though there's plenty of glass, there are sun shades that come down to, depending again on what time of day or how hot the window becomes, the shades will automatically come down, or when it cools off enough, it'll go up so you can enjoy the view. So we're very proud of the work that was done by the architects and the builders to get us to be LED platinum, again, in line with the sustainability and all the efforts that we're all trying to achieve in this time. So I can go on more, but later we can do that. I'd like to have you do whatever it is your presentation is. So whoever wants to speak first. I want to introduce my colleagues. This is the Legislative Secretary, Senator Regine Biscoe-Lee, and she's our advocate on the environment. She keeps trying to get me to sign on to these bills, but I tell her everybody hates me enough. But I support her. This is our member on the APIL, Senator James Espaldon. I think some of you may know him from APIL. And Senator Joe San Augustine. He's Mr. Taxman. Not very popular this last month, no. He's no longer with them, he's with us. But I give you guys the floor because I know you have quite a bit to present.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Senator Lee, Senator Spaldon, and Senator San Augustine for joining us at our joint policy forum. We've been doing this now for probably about 7 or 8 years, and the rationale with the policy forum is to come and meet with our policymakers, including our reps on the APIL board, and share with you what are some of the resolutions that were adopted at our nonprofit Congress. And as you can see, we have regional representation. And then to follow up with you later on to see which of these have policy implications that that you may be interested in bringing forward. I'd like to introduce our persons that are here representing Payu-Ta, representing our regional representatives and our other special guests. For the record, my name is Sarah Thomas Nedaduk. I'm the current chair for Payu-Ta. I'm also the current chair for the Pacific Islands Association of Non-Governmental Organizations based in Suva, Fiji. To my right is Secretary General from the Pacific Islands Development Forum, Francois Martel. We also have with us from a senior advisor from the Pacific Islands Forum, Penasoni Napoto, also from Fiji. And I'll start around the table with our guests and our board members. Representing the Federated States of Micronesia, Attorney Marcella Jack. From Piango, again based in Suva, is our sub-regional program coordinator, Akmal Ali. From the Republic of Belau, Bilom Temengil. From the Marshall Islands Council of NGOs, Majuro, Republic of the Marshall Islands, Alson Kellen. To my left is our Vice Chair, Eddie Regis from Flame Tree Empowerment here on Guam. To Secretary General's right is Zita Pangilinan, board member from Hadza. Next to Penasoni is from the Pohnpei, Federated States of Micronesia, the current chair of FANGO, which is the FSM Association of NGOs, is Herman Semes. And to his right is our board member, Executive Director of Gumamami, Samuel Ilisugam. We have other guests in the room, and if I could ask them to perhaps introduce themselves. Can we start with our youth rep, Mori Mori from Chuk? Mori? Okay. Do you need a, do you have to have a mic?
Morning, everyone. My name is Mori Mori. I come from Chuk. I'm with the Chuk Youth Council. It's an NGO in Chuk. Thank you very much.
Kia ora and good morning. I'm Jane Foster. I work for Oxfam in the Pacific, currently based in Fiji. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Andy George. I serve as the chairman for Civil Society Organization of Kushai.
Good morning, Robson Henry from Kushai. I'm the vice chairman for Civil Society Kushai and also the president for the Kushai Island Veterans Association. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, did 26 years. Thank you.
Brasilelia, I'm Maria Donder from Bombay, and I am also a board of Abango and also the vice president for Bombay Women Council.
Tuwa Betty Secret from Koshai. I work for the regional nonprofit organization called the Micronesia Conservation Trust. However, I am pleased to be part of this delegation in my capacity as secretary for the Koshai Civil Society Organizations. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is LaJoy Spears. I represent the University of Guam Cooperative Extension. I'm also here on behalf of GALA.
Patrick Maloney. I'm from Guam, instructor at GCC, and I'm actively involved with a bunch of the nonprofits here.
Manana Siju'us, Vivian Damas, representing the Division of Social Work at the University of Guam.
My name is Yvonne Napati. I'm Program Coordinator for Payu-Ta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Senators. This is who's in the room right now, and as you can see, I think we have diverse representation not only from the various islands in Micronesia, but also a great diversity in terms of the different areas in which we're all involved in. So I thank you again for today. I want to share with you that the resolutions that you have before you are really preliminary, and what our practice is that these were brought forth yesterday, and then we'll have a 30-day window in which people may comment or make additional contributions to these resolutions. So at the end of that 30-day period, we'll transmit the formal document to you. What has happened this week is we started on, I want to say Wednesday, with a best practice showcase where we travel to Sanctuary and Gumamami and ICANN to see the kinds of programs that they have there and to share ideas on how we can best provide services to our young people and our families, as well as persons with disabilities. So it was a very enriching tour of those agencies. We returned to the West End, where we proceeded with focus groups and a roundtable discussion. Our focused areas were on workforce development, on veterans issues, and the third were community and social issues. And it included cultural preservation and promotion. That was a very big part of our discussion. So that's a discussion that was facilitated by Dr. Vivian Damas from the University of Guam, and we will have a summary of those as well. But some of the thoughts and ideas that are before you also came from Wednesday's roundtable discussion. On Thursday, we convened the 8th Nonprofit Congress. Our theme this year is navigating currents of change through collective leadership. We had the pleasure of having Dr. Robert Underwood, President of the University of Guam, provide us the keynote, his keynote speech. And we're trying to get a copy of that because I have to say that he was very, not only inspiring, but challenging, and in terms of our thoughts and some of the things that have been done around the Pacific and around the nation in terms of collective leadership and in terms of even the ideas of how do we really successfully navigate change? How can we best do that? It was followed by a presentation from Secretary General Francois, and I actually would like to ask you if you could just do a brief overview of that, Secretary General, what you feel is the key points. And then it was followed by Charlotte Season. Unfortunately, she left this morning, but Charlotte Season is a senior official from the United States Department of State, and her particular area is international drug demand reduction. So it was a very fascinating, because I really myself am just learning about the work that the State Department does beyond its borders in terms of drug reduction demand, or drug demand reduction. And it's really a focus on prevention and on treatment with evidence-based practice curriculum that they go around throughout all the countries and provide training and support to develop and to do capacity building in the various countries. So I think we're going to see more of Charlotte Cison in the State Department, and we're just glad we had this first time to meet her and see, you know, what it is that we could do to intersect with them. And of course, all of the islands in the FAS can participate readily in those programs, which I'm sure will be the next step in the next few months. And as you know, all of us in Micronesia and the Pacific can benefit from this kind of work, because we have such a shortage of persons in the area of substance abuse treatment and prevention, and we have some very serious problems with specifically or primarily with the drug of choice of meth and with alcohol. So it was very good for her to have joined us, and her presentation was followed by the Pacific Islands Forum Senior Advisor, Penny Napoto, who's also with us. So at this point, if I may, Mr. Speaker and Senators, just ask Secretary General to just give the highlights of his presentation. We do have copies of Charlotte Cison, Secretary General Martel, and Penny Napoto's presentation that I can also share with you, and I think you'll find all of them of great interest to you. Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Sarah. First, Mr. Speaker, Senators, and all the colleagues around the table, but in particular, the chair of Piango. Piango is a full member of my regional organization. So the presentation I did was specifically an introduction to the organization as a really an innovative approach to engage with civil society and ensure that they are part of decision-making and implementation related to, and the planning related to the organization and the implementation of its program. The PIDF is a young organization. I describe myself as a toddler on the international scene. But a toddler that has managed in the last 2 years to increase its membership from 9 members to 14 members, and that has become a permanent observer to the United Nations General Assembly. So I sit every year at the United Nations in New York at the General Assembly, representing the interest of the Pacific Islands, including the civil society member. The focus of my presentation was to show the extent of participation and engagement of civil society in the organization's decision-making, planning, and implementation. So it was a summary of what the organization is all about, but also how we could utilize the organizations to achieve sustainable development and poverty eradication. So we have a very narrow mandate given to us by the leaders. And of course, it's important for me to mention that Guam is fully eligible to be a full member of the organization. And it has some participation in our previous Leaders Summit with the representation mainly from the civil society. So essentially, I indicated clearly that it is in the advantage of the Pacific Islands countries and territories to become a member of PIDF, mainly because of its actually structure as a multi-stakeholder organization that could represent the interest of the Pacific. And our focus is on enabling environment for sustainable development and poverty eradication, using the tools that we call concepts of green economy, the green growth, in sustainable blue economies of the Pacific Islands. So considering that the islands, the Pacific, are actually large ocean states, and that this needed to be incorporated into the concept of green growth. So we have a program that's focused on 3 clusters of activities. The first one is mainstreaming green growth in Pacific Islands. At the moment, only 3 Pacific Island countries have a green growth framework developed and approved by the government. So we need to mainstream this. Our focus within the green economy is on sustainable blue economy. So basically, harnessing marine resources in a sustainable way for the benefits of the local communities and the countries. The second cluster is on climate action. For us, climate change is a major issue for most of the Pacific Islands, including Guam and CNMI, particularly in this region, but FSM and others, in supporting and advocating for climate action and ambition. And so for this, we do participate in many events, but also building capacity to try to reduce gas emissions. And the third one is about it's about building island resilience. And this is a topic that is really important at the moment, particularly in the context of increased disasters, as you know, increased intensity, and also the long-term damages caused by, in particular, climate change. So you will see more typhoons, we will see more cyclones, and this situation remains important. But what's more important is to be able to be prepared for this and be made resilient through food security, through water security, to shelter security, and to have this in prevention. So these are the three clusters of activities of the organizations. So my message also was that we are members of an international network of small island development states, organizations, and there is a lot of lessons learned and best practices out there, and it's good to see and to utilize this expertise and exchanges to actually benefit the activities we have here in the Pacific. So one of my comment was to consider for Guam to become a member of the Global Island Partnership, who includes the Marshall Islands, includes Palau, includes the state of Hawaii, and the county of Hawaii are actually full members of this organization. So there's a lot of relationship already with Micronesia, and nothing really to lose, but everything to gain. So in summary, this was basically my presentation yesterday. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. I hope that when Dr. Underwood spoke yesterday, he mentioned the fact that we just had our the university just had its 9th sustainability conference, and we've been trying to work on that from the university. This legislature, I believe, way back, even before James and I were here, established marine preserves. And I don't know if you were able to go snorkeling in Tumon Bay, but a number of people who have snorkeled in Tumon Bay and in Hanauma Bay in Hawaii insist that we actually have more fish in our Tumon than they do there. So we're quite proud of the marine preserves that we have established throughout the island. We were second to Hawaii, when we passed the shark finning bill locally. We've been trying to do as much as possible. We've not moved as far as maybe Palau. We'd like to, and with the Conservancy's assistance, maybe in the next legislature we might be able to do some of that. I know that the university is doing quite a bit with their agricultural side and the sustainability, the Center for Sustainability, to build a sustainable green future. I know we have on our agenda next week a thing about food sustainability with some lease of some lands and some other things, and so we're trying, and hopefully when you make the presentation or when the resolution comes to us, that we'll be able to go through and respond by saying that we've tried to address most of the 17 points that you have on on the STGs at least I'm quite proud of what we've done here on Guam, and I'd like to be able to just document that when we go through it and have it with you so that when you go to the United Nations next time, you can say that there are efforts being made by the islands in the Pacific. We are very conscious of the fact that of climate change. We realize that, fortunately or unfortunately, since we're one of the islands with some peaks and some altitude, that we're probably going to be the point of the center for climate change refugees, unfortunately. And so we really have to address what's happening out there so that we don't have to face that in the future. So we are very cognizant of that. We have new young members like Senator Lee, who's pushing as much as possible, but we also have members that have been in the legislature for 20-some years and have been working on this kind of legislation. So just know that we're trying, and we'll see whether or not we can get the membership together. But thank you very much for that presentation, and just be aware that Guam is trying its best to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask Penisoni Napoto, the Senior Advisor to the Pacific Islands Forum, to just do a brief summary of his presentation yesterday.
Honorable Speaker and fellow senators, thank you very much for the opportunities to be able to speak with you this morning. The invitation from Payu-Ta to the Forum Secretariat basically called on the Forum Secretariat to make a presentation at the 8th Congress of Non-Profit Organizations in Micronesia, and noting the theme that they had for this year around navigating currents of change through collective leadership, kind of like resonated with the current forum leaders' narrative around the Blue Pacific, a collective regional story for regional action. So the presentation that I provided to the group yesterday basically provided a background on what the Forum, Pacific Islands Forum is about. Its inception in 1971, when leaders of the Pacific Islands came together to look at areas where they could basically work together and be able to achieve more than they used to when they were individuals and alone. So from then until most recently, the leaders in 2014 basically endorsed a framework for Pacific regionalism, one that would advocate for deeper and genuine efforts towards regionalism. And this framework basically identifies two very key things, and one is around inclusivity, that the Pacific Islands Forum no longer is a bureaucratic and technocratic institution where issues that are taken to leaders for endorsement and decision-making comes through their own bureaucracies, but has opened it up for non-state actors, civil society and private sector to be able to participate in this process. The framework of Pacific regionalism is into its third year of implementation and has given the voice of the Pacific people at large an opportunity to raise issues to leaders, to Pacific Island Forum leaders to consider. And in 2015, the first year this process was undertaken, the leaders received nearly 68 submissions, and 48 of them came from civil society organizations. And for the first time, when the leaders prioritized the priorities for the region, 3 of them basically, out of the 5 that were endorsed by leaders, came through the civil society. And this came through a public policy consultation process under the framework of Pacific regionalism. And the framework itself basically now guides the work of the Forum Secretariat and the Pacific Islands Forum itself. In 2017, in Samoa last year, the Pacific Islands Forum leaders recommitted and deepened their commitment to working together through a narrative around the Blue Pacific. The Blue Pacific gives us an opportunity to reimagine ourselves as one big Pacific continent than small dots in this vast continent. And we own a third of the world's space. And under the Blue Pacific concept, the leaders have thought to use this as a tool to be able to influence players and stakeholders outside the region and within the region, using our shared identity as Pacific people, our shared geography as inhabitants of this blue continent, and our shared wealth and resources through our fishery. So based on these key issues, the Pacific Islands Forum continues to advocate for issues that directly impacts the lives of our Pacific populations. In responding to emerging threats that has been identified through a paper that was put together at the Forum Secretariat called the Pacific Regionalism Report, it was identified a couple of emerging issues which looked at this region becoming, there's an increasing uncertainty in terms of the geopolitical and geopolitics within and outside this region, and how it's impacting how we engage with players outside this region. We're also seeing an increasing crowded region. There's more countries outside this region who are having an interest in this region. The reasons are quite diverse. Some come in the name of fisheries, some come in the name of climate financing, some come in the name of development financing. The region too, and the Pacific region and most of the forum members are having bilaterals with non-traditional partners which don't normally engage in this region. We're also seeing an evolving security threats, not only through climate change, but there's been increasing cases of unreported, unregulated, fisheries that's happening, that's come through, also promoting lots of transnational crimes and other security threats. We're also seeing an increase in terms of our environment degradation through climate change, and we see that as a threat. Now we're asking, how do these threats speak to the solidarity of the Pacific Blue Continent as a whole? So based on this, we wanted to mirror that against what civil society, not as individual groups, but as a sector, as a regional sector, could partner with governments to ensure that we bring security to this region. We know our region is basically viewed by countries outside this region as an empty playing field. And we know what's going to happen if securities aren't managed outside our region. So we had an important and critical message that we want to bring to the table, and to re-emphasize the need to work together. And I think we need to work beyond just the Pacific Island Forum membership. And I think the Pacific Islands Forum is open to dialogue and engagement to ensure that we can promote this radical revolution concept that we're promoting through the Blue Pacific. Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much. And I neglected in my other statement to recognize the fact, at least for a number of us, that our judiciary is also involved in trying to address this issue of climate change. Just last November, the judiciary Guam to the Pacific Judicial Council, which is a council of the judiciaries of Guam, Marshall Islands, Federated States, Palau. They have a educational forum at least twice a year. And this last November, they devoted the 5 days of the conference to climate change and the ocean. And it was a very, very good conference. We brought judges, judicial staff together. The University of Guam assisted in bringing out speakers from University of Hawaii, lawyers from Washington, D.C., and it was a really good conference to discuss the issue. Unfortunately, it wasn't open to the entire going down all the way in the forum countries, but we did have a lot of discussion on that. I attended as a former member of the judiciary, but we're trying, just it's not as formal as you were talking about in the civil society and how you're wanting to do it, but I just wanted to give you an example. Here we do have, in all the bills that are passed by this body, we engage the community in public hearings, and some of them are quite contentious. When I introduced and tried to pass the shark finning bill to try to join our brothers and link between Hawaii, Palau, Federated States, and Marshall Islands, link our hands to try to protect the sharks, to protect the ocean environment. The fight here was vitriolic. I mean, really vitriolic. The public hearing room was packed with fishermen who just railed against us. And I remember we thought that we had lost the bill. I mean, I thought for sure it was done, that there was no way that my colleagues were going to vote for the legislation with the fishing group that opposed to us. And the savior was a 16 or 17-year-old student from one of the high schools. And he came up in recognition of the young man. He came up and he was the last speaker. He just, after everybody, and the room was really tense, and he just came up and he goes, I want to remind all of you that the future of the ocean is ours, and it is your responsibility to protect it for us. The room went dead silent. I got the bill passed the next week. But, it takes that kind of, and it's engaging the young people and everybody in there. I mean, it really was a huge fight. I mean, we had earlier fights with trying to address scuba fishing, which I lost, but tried to get help from the university. But I'm going to have to try to get, with the young senators, to get more of the young people involved, because I really do think that once we recognize our responsibility to leave this planet in as good a condition as we had it, then maybe we might be a little more responsible in the legislation that we work on and pass to address the sustainability of the future. But I assure you that we're trying, and I wanted to, one, acknowledge the judiciary that they're also involved in this, but more importantly, I really wanted to acknowledge the fact that the young people and their voices are being heard and have been very important in a lot of the movements that we're putting forward in addressing these issues.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We'd like to proceed with presenting to you the resolutions that were drafted yesterday from discussions for the last 2 days. And I'd like to, there'll be several of us that will speak to each one. And I will begin with our Vice Chair, Eddie Regis.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Speaker, Senators. I'll just start with the whereas statement. Whereas those assembled committed to and recognize the following. Recognize the current and ongoing issues of housing, employment, and transportation with our veterans and individuals with disabilities. I think it was the discussion that we had during the Nonprofit Congress was very enlightening, where we really gained a better appreciation as to the shared concerns of the members that participate in the services with respect to housing and employment and transportation. And at some point, it became very emotional, especially those that are affected with individuals with disabilities. And one example was cited where an individual with a disability is scheduled for a meeting with an organization, and it takes, for a 1-hour meeting, it takes them 8 hours of travel time in order to attend that meeting. And so this is pretty much prevalent with respect to the other areas of housing and employment and the challenges of employing individuals with disabilities. A case in point is we know that the Division of Voc Rehab has approximately 500 some clients, but their placement rate as far as employment is only about 5% of that. And those that do get employed, unfortunately, don't stay in employment for a very long time because they lack the necessary supports and also understandings from the employers, where employers are tasked to make money and be efficient and so forth. So we have to do a better job at working through some of those issues in order to provide better access to individuals with disabilities as well as veterans. Okay. The second one is recognize the limitation of services and focus from those federal governments to equal access to services for veterans in our region. It has also recognized the need to focus efforts to collaboration and fostering relationships with the Veterans Affairs Office in Hawaii. And that discussion just primarily focused on some of the major challenges and barriers that veterans are confronted with as far as receiving access to services in a timely manner. And I know that the legislature has been addressing that aggressively, and it's always been a concern for those organizations that support individuals with, or the veterans. And a lot of it has, we had Joe San Augustine, the director of Veterans Affairs Office, and he was indicating some of the steps that they were taking in order to provide the necessary information to support the data that's necessary with respect to justifying funding and so forth to help our veterans here on the island. And we understand that regionally, the situation is worse with our Pacific communities. So, thank you.
I'm sorry, I just feel that I'd like to give the opportunity to Robson Henry, who is a veteran and is in the FSM, if he'd like to just say a word or two about services, just to update all of us on the state of affairs of veteran services outside of Guam. We're quite limited here. Then you go to Saipan and there's really limitations. As you know, there's one person that handles all the different veteran services in the CNMI. And then when you go to the rest of our islands in Micronesia, there's virtually nothing. And yet there's hundreds of veterans who have retired or completed service in various branches. And many of them have come home forever changed. So I'd just like to ask Robson to be so kind just to say a few words about this.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Speaker, staffs and colleagues, thank you. I've been waiting for this opportunity myself too, and thank you for giving me the chance. In regards to this, number one and number two, it is real and a real big issue for COFA nations. And I think with the help of Guam being part of the U.S., the leverage will be much better. If we're talking about region, Guam, Palau, Mauritius, or even FSM. And up until now, there has been nothing being done for veterans in all COFA nations. And what we got from the federal government, the VA, is we work with Guam to give us the medical assistance that we need. But it's been going on for the last couple years, maybe 3-4 years ago, and we found out that it's not really working as far as medical assistance. And I know that Guam, Saipan, even Samoa is having the same issues. If they cannot take care of you guys, you know, the same thing is trickled down to the COVID nations. So we really I think Guam would be another avenue for us if we can use Guam to do the dialogues and to expand to all these COVID nations, all the issues that you are facing, to include all Micronesians. So I'm really happy that this has come up with Payu-Ta, and all these are really pressing issues for us back home. And ma'am, I think that would be what I can share for now, but I'm open for any other questions or discussion, if I may. Thank you.
I do have a question.
Sure.
We know that a lot of it is driven by the numbers. And the question is, do you have a count of the number of veterans throughout Micronesia?
Sir, for Koshai, we do have a rough number. I think it's close to about 400. Registry is another issue in dealing with these veterans. It's hard to keep track of every veterans, and I know it's an issue here everywhere. We have to set up some kind of registry where we can register every Micronesian. I'm speaking on behalf of Koshai only. I am the president there for the veterans over there. And the number we got as of last year is about 300 some veterans that we can, you know, put on our record. It's an island of about 6,000 people. And to compare that per capita, that's a large number. Did I answer your question, sir?
It does, but only specific to Koshai. And I'm just wondering, and I have to ask this question because even a few years back at the APIL meetings, this was definitely one of the main topics that we spoke about. And I believe the ambassador to FSM from the United States was there as well. And I think, I'm not really sure the quantification was actually stated about how many veterans are throughout the FSM and throughout Micronesia. And I think if we can perhaps get a better handle of at least a closer proximity to what that number is, because you're right, even here on Guam, getting our veterans to register or to at least be acknowledged as part of a registry has been difficult also. But again, in moving forward, the issue to the federal government, you know, concerning Veterans Affairs, numbers, I think, count. And I think there's been efforts and there have been some great ideas of how to maybe even make Guam the central office for regional Veterans Affairs, including Micronesia, as opposed to, like, say, for example, even the medical services, instead of flying all the way out to Hawaii, that Guam would be definitely a more practical solution and viable solution in being able to treat the veterans' issues throughout Micronesia.
Yes, yes, sir. I'm engaging with some people from Palau that I know, and there's a push right now that I've worked with Pohnpei to see if we can come up with that number. And yes, that's real, and we've been trying to carry up all the numbers for FSN, and hopefully Palau and Marshall will do the same so we can move forward with the numbers that we got. And we're aware of that, and we're still working on it. Hopefully we can go soon. And you mentioned APIL. We did introduce the same resolution to APIL along with our National Congress. So it's up there somewhere, and we just need somebody to start knocking on doors, make things happen for us.
Right, and I think that would be instrumental in really addressing a lot of the issues. And guys, that's just from our part, because we know even from the federal part, they always seem to place I guess their concern that we haven't done the count correctly, or there's always seemed kind of delay in being able to address the Veterans Affairs out here, although we know that per capita, again, the region provides so much support to the Department of Defense in terms of manpower and whatnot, and yet we're not getting perhaps the services that have been promised to all those who have served the country. But I believe the count is very important.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Not, then that's it for now.
If I may, and I think it's a very astute observation with respect to the data component, because that's applicable for everything, and we had I had that discussion with the Secretary General with respect to, in order to get any kind of support, especially funding support, it would be necessary to have data. But our island communities are so small, but if you look at us collectively, I think the numbers will speak for themselves.
Thank you. I have much to say on that issue, and I'll try to hold it down, because when the burden of proof is on us, and the service has been provided and we've been faithful followers, so to speak, that's really unfortunate. And having have been involved in trying to do the count, I get that. I get those challenges. And here we are now with many veterans here on Guam and the thousands, as well as all over Micronesia, who have limited access to very basic such as health care. And we're not even talking about areas of specialization, such as treatment for post-traumatic stress, traumatic brain injury, substance use, and just a host of other health conditions that can be related directly to the trauma that our veterans have been exposed through their service. So as much as I understand the need for the numbers, I think that we need to continue to be together here and make the case about why the United States should take care of and provide greater access to these fundamental services for our veterans. Thank you for the good question, Senator. Can we proceed with Marstella Jack from Pohnpei?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Speaker, if I may just add one more issue onto that veterans. In addition to health care, we have challenges with housing. Our veterans are not eligible for veterans housing in COFA nations because they are residing in areas that are non-US. But when they join the military, they're US, because that's under the Department of State. But when they exit the military, they're considered, under Veterans Affairs, they're considered non-US. So we may have some lobbying to do to maybe change some laws somewhere in Washington, D.C. So I wanted to add that on there. Thank you. Now let's get to the most interesting issue, and that's violence against women. Mr. Speaker, I know I've raised this issue a couple of times in this same forum, but I want to report that I'd like to thank you and Guam Legislature and APIL for the assistance and the lobbying that you have done on behalf of our women in Pohnpei, because on November 7, 2017, the legislature finally came to their senses and they adopted the domestic violence legislation. That was after 9 years of lobbying. And APIL, I know APIL did pass some resolutions on that, so I wanted to thank you for that. Now, if you look at our third resolution, it says it is to recognize the social issues around human trafficking, child exploitation, intimate partner violence, and violence against women and girls. It is also recognized that the need to continue the development of multidisciplinary response teams and coalitions to address these issues. I'll just use Pohnpei as an example, and maybe Koshai State to a certain extent. They also have the law in place. FSM has state laws on human trafficking and the national government as well, but we don't have the necessary response teams in place. And it is a big issue for us. We've done prosecution in Pohnpei State and in Chuuk State as well. So the issue is alive in FSM. The Congress discussed this issue because we feel that it is an increasing problem, and the measures that have been put in place to address the issue is still inadequate. Now that we have laws in place, the problem has become very well known, and it's being litigated in the courts. However, our judiciary, Mr. Speaker, a case that was prosecuted last year in Chuuk involving a 13-year-old young girl, the judge we obtained the conviction, and the judge, the sentencing was 2 years suspended and $5,000 fine. And there was an outcry from the public, especially those living in Chuuk, because it's not sending the right message about how we deal with human trafficking. So perhaps this is an issue that APIL can take on and work with our courts, with the judiciary, on how we can come up with more, not relevant, but maybe more stringent sentencing measures so that there is actual, I don't know how to say it, but that there is a sign of, we show commitment. There's an actual showing that our governments are serious about the offense of human trafficking in our region. I wanted to put that out there, Mr. Speaker, so that you can share it with your APIL colleagues. Thank you very much.
Actually, I will mention this to the Chief Justice because the Pacific Judicial Council, about 3 years ago, had what I thought was one of the best, I call it CLE, Continuing Legal Education, but education forums put together on human trafficking and sexual abuse. I learned quite a bit, and I'll make mention of the need to have another session, maybe just on sentencing.
Thank you.
And I hope that Sarah mentioned that when she was my chief policy analyst a decade ago, we passed some very good pieces of legislation on education. I know that during this month that you guys are here and you're reading the newspaper, you probably think that you have come to some strange sexual sewer where every day there seems to be a report of some child being sexually abused. From our work, Sarah and my work in child abuse, April is a spike month. And the reason for that is because April is Sexual Abuse and Domestic Abuse Awareness Month. And whenever we send the social workers out to talk to the students about what is proper and what is improper touch, or what's wrong, what's right, kids will eventually come up, or the worker will notice the look on some child's face and will ask why that response, and invariably come out that that child has been a victim themselves. And so hopefully she'll share with you some of the legislation that she worked on and got me to introduce and passed, because we have some really good pieces there. And the education of the elementary in the Lonnie Kate law, I think, is probably, I think for me, will be one of my proudest legacies that we've done. So I'm hoping that she'll share that with all of you about educating kids, because in the 10 years that I was juvenile court judge, it amazed me the number of kids who did not realize that what was being done to them was wrong. They had grown up with it, that they thought that it was just normal or part of life. And it wasn't until some social worker mentioned it in April that it was wrong, that they would notice it. But now we, through efforts that Sarah and I did in the Lonnie Kate law, they are educating students. It's part of the curriculum now. And so hopefully she'll share with you that at some later day. But I will remind the judiciary to have another training session on sentencing and addressing this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, I got emotional there because it's real, Marstella, and I feel you, and there's a lot to be learned, and some landmark legislation that a speaker brought forth in 2010, and also the removal of the statutes of limitation for the reporting of child abuse and of any kind of abuse later on. So it's really historic, and I think good model legislation for anyone, because I think Guam leads the way, even in the nation, especially for the statutes of limitation. So thank you, Speaker. I'd like to ask my colleague, Alison Kellen, to continue, please.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Speaker, Senators. You know, she just gave me this few minutes ago, and when I read it, it just too close. She was talking about emotion. This is actually, being from the Marshall Islands, of course, just when I say Marshall Islands, you probably already know what I'm trying to say. So number 4 is recognize the regional issues and effects of climate crisis, displacement of people from their own island homes, as well as the loss of culture due to colonization and Western impact. I was actually born on Kwajalein Atoll, where a lot of people were replaced from their islands because so they can do the missile testing, and it's still happening until today. But I am from Bikini Atoll, where the nuclear testing took place in the 1940s. So when we talk about displacement of people or loss of culture, that's the story. Now Marshall Islands are facing king tides, which I call them mini tsunamis. You know, it used to be like once every few years. Now it's 2-3 times a year. We just had one before I came here. And, you know, I guess this is something that we are facing in our shores, and we understand, but we actually in the Marshall, we live this. So this is very important to us. I am part of a team that works with the governments that go all over the world and talk about climate change and the impact of nuclear testing. So it's very important that we all work in partnership. And this is where our NGOs actually, you know, to a lot of the work, and I thank Sarah and Payu-Ta for these opportunities annually. This is my second year here to come and share ideas and share our stories so we know what we're facing, what needs to happen. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I'm sure the short line that I just mentioned it means a lot, that we can all go from here and see what needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Elson. Heartfelt as well. I'd like to ask our board member Zita Pangilinan from Honta to continue.
Buenas and Situus Ma'asi, Speaker and Senators of this wonderful legislature, and also our colleagues here around the table who have really contributed well to the dialogue and the discussions. And I think I want to highlight, again, you know, with Payu-Ta and the value of this nonprofit Congress with our region is our dialogues and our discussions and the excitement of all the great stuff that's also happening. You know, it's hard work and there's a lot of depressing stats, but there's really great love and passion around this, the group. And so I want to share that as we talk about all our indigenous ways and culture, we know that our people sustained ourselves for over 3,500 years. And we're taking it back. You know, we're recognizing that our identity lies with our environment, our lands, our people, and our culture. And in this resolution, number 5, we're recognizing also the impact of colonization and Western with the effects of substance abuse issues, as well as sexual health, not only to the community at large, but the LGBTQ population. It is also recognized that there is a need to create safe space to address topics such as these within different levels of community, such as families and public organizations. Basically, we as a people can heal, can work on healing all these issues, and the healing happens when we come together and we talk, and we take back our traditions and our culture and reconnect our people, our youth, to who we are as a people with pride and dignity. And we hope that within more years we can lessen all this issues and by providing strength for the families as well as our organizations. Situs Masi.
Thank you, Zita. I want to make note that we're aware that the General Assembly of the Association of Pacific Island Legislatures will take place in June of this year in Pohnpei. So we do plan to be there. We have been invited by Speaker Fernando Scallion. So we would hope that we'll have an audience with you, Senator Spaldon, to discuss some of the issues and possible resolutions that might be entertained at the General Assembly, and we'll make an appointment with you to do such.
I look forward to that meeting. Again, we have representatives from all around the Pacific, and I think that would be a proper forum to basically introduce and try to get support from all the island leaders. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Senator Spaldon. Thank you, Zita. I'd like to ask Akmal Ali to talk very briefly on number 6, representing Piango.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Honorable Speaker, and Honorable Senators. Nisambula Vinaka, greetings and half a day. Number 6, recognize the need to focus and take initiatives on sustainable development goals. It is also recognized that there is a need to prioritize the top SDGs. Honorable Speaker, as you know, the SDGs are a set of goals that was endorsed by the United Nations on the 24th of September 2015. It was an initiative that followed the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. It has 17 goals, 169 targets, and 270 indicators approximately. The top SDGs meaning that we are planning to have a Guam National Consultation of Civil Societies, and in Guam, and not only in Guam, but around the Micronesian region through the Micronesian Hub. Each of the countries the civil society will recognize the goals or the equivalent or the applicable goals that we would be working on and the priorities. So that is what we mean. And of course, it cannot be, there is a lot of work that is being done on Guam in terms of meeting the goals. However, it's just the civil society have recognized that there is a need to connect the goals with the work that is being done. So we are planning to do under the leadership of Payu-Ta, we will be organizing a 2-day national consultation, Guam National Consultation on SDGs on the 24th and 25th of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Akmal. And that goes into number 7, which is working collaboratively with the various communities to prioritize and put into motion the SDGs. And I appreciate, Mr. Speaker, your summary of some of the work that has already been done. And Akmal, there's how many targets and how many indicators for the 17 SDGs?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 17 SDGs are further divided into 169 targets, and then each of the targets are then measured through indicators, and there are 270 approximately. And I believe the Pacific leaders are now trying to identify around 193 that are applicable to the Pacific.
So that's the indicators and the targets are there, and it's just going to take us, as Mr. Speaker said, there's quite a bit of work that's been done. We just need to bring it all together and document it so we can show what we've done in those various SDGs. So thank you very much, Akmal. Herman Semes, please join us for number 8.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Speaker. Item number 8, recognize the need for civil society organizations in Micronesia to be regulated by a Pianco Code of Minimum Standards after exploring the concepts of development effectiveness and SDGs. Mr. Speaker, with the increasing role of civil society in development within the region, there is an ongoing work in developing the capacities of the civil society NGOs in various parts of the region, which our regional organization is helping us with Pianco. And part of the capacity building is to help the civil society organizations establish organizational policies, administrative, financial, and whatever is needed to make them operate efficiently and in a more transparent and accountable manner. Pianco, our regional organization, is in the process of developing standards that will be used in helping this part of our capacity building, so that in the end, all the civil society organizations will be guided by a minimum standard as established by the region.
Thank you. And just a point of clarification, Piango's commitment in partnership with PIFs is to do capacity strengthening and look at the core minimum standards as well as the sustainable development goals in the various subregions of the Pacific, and primarily why Akmal Ali is here from Piango to spend 6 months in Micronesia to work with the various CSOs and NGOs to meet those goals. Thank you, Herman, for doing that. Akmal just completed, a week in Pohnpei with all the various FSM NGO leaders going through this process, and it was a very successful endeavor. The next is recognize the need to explore different ways of strategic planning, its effects on nonprofit agencies, and the benefits strategic planning has on the community. There's quite a number of models for strategic planning, and what's most important is to identify what is it that internally and externally, making sure we understand the concepts of being a strategic thinker, making sure we're doing our environmental scans, taking a look at what's going on within an organization and what's going on around us and for us in the region and globally as well. So we appreciate that there's quite a number, but what we want to do is encourage all the NLUs and CSOs and nonprofits around the regions to come together with government and private business to develop these strategic plans so that we move forward together. When we visited you, Mr. Speaker, about a week or so ago, we walked away with a deep appreciation for the insight that you had in terms of the need to really diversify our Payu-Ta membership so that it was more reflective and aligned with the SDGs. So we really took that to heart. And I think through our affiliation with Piango and the variety of NGOs that sit at this table, we're reaching a lot of that and we're sharing and learning more things, but we're also looking at home here on Guam as well. So we're glad to say we have one new member that kind of reaches that, and we think through that new membership with the Guam Preservation Trust on our board of directors that will also incite greater diversity in our membership. So we want to thank you for that recommendation. I'd like to ask Sam, do you want to continue with that as well?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Speaker, Senator. My respect. So again, my name is Samuel Sugam. I'm actually from Guam, but I'm culturally Yapese. I'm from one of the very remote islands in Yap, and growing up, our elders used to tell us stories about voyaging to Guam or to the Marianas. And in their stories, they tell of three currents. There is a current southwest of Guam. There is one near west of Rhoda, and there's another kind of current east of Guam. So in their stories, when we travel to Guam, we need to keep those in mind. There are certain times that these currents get strong. There are certain times that they change direction. So to navigate towards this region, you need to know the movements of those currents at certain times. And Mr. Speaker, I'm just sharing that because our theme for this year's conference is navigating currents of change through collective leadership. And I think you can interpret that theme in many ways. But in relation to the resolution, it highlights two areas for me. One is the recognition of increased role of nonprofit organizations, or what we call the civil society, in addressing our community issues and needs. Second is that in order for us to address these needs, we need to address them in a collective leadership or collective efforts. So those are the two things that are highlighted for me through this resolution. And the resolution reads, we recognize the need to increase membership and awareness locally and regionally, to have more nonprofit agencies actively engaged towards the same goal and move towards the same direction towards a sustainable Micronesia. We all know our region is being threatened, the sustainability of our livelihood is being threatened because of different currents. And currents can be coming out from within our communities, within our governments, maybe from the business sector, and from outside the region. So in Dr. Underwood's keynote speaker yesterday, he painted this very unregulated movement of currents. When he was sharing that with us in his keynote in his keynote, he kind of initially put me in a disempowered position, where I'm thinking that there's a lot of currents going on that we won't be able to address. But throughout the talk, when he reflected on collective leadership, on some of our combined efforts, and some of the successes that came out of those efforts, that kind of gave me hope. And I think that's the call that came out from, that's one of the calls that came out from our conference, is that in order for us to have a sustainable Micronesia, we need the participation of everybody, and we need to all work together. Thank you. When our vice chairman spoke about people getting very passionate about our discussions yesterday, I was one of them, and I'm getting passionate now, so I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, and heartfelt as well. Zita?
Of course, I think I also sound like a broken record, and sometimes can't speak with regards to the loss of cultural practices and the need to continue to teach the youth of these practices to reinforce the continuation of tradition. But I'm not giving up, we're not giving up, because really I think, like you said earlier, Speaker, the youth, Kat's not with us today, she's not able to be here, but when we look at Kat and we look at Maury and we look at, even within our organizations here on the island, what gives us energy are the youth and their passion. And they seem to be very wise and much wiser than we are, and in addressing, so we are definitely, as the elders, also within our healing tradition, we're really looking at our youth and our elders paving the way and guiding us. But I no longer, we are at risk in terms of the deep-rooted traditions, but I think that's being revived, that's being revitalized. And I'm coming away from this Congress with great hope. And, our chair has done an amazing job in bringing us all together in this continual dialogue. So perhaps we can edit this in terms of loss, but the revitalization of all that we do that will, and I truly, truly believe that healing the world begins in this blue continent, the blue Pacific. We, as a people in the blue Pacific, will be the initiators of healing the entire world.
I will offer one challenge. The one nonprofit that I would hope that you would be able to get on board is the Young Men's League Guam.
Okay.
For the members, for all the people here, I didn't realize it until I went to their celebration a couple of weeks ago. They just celebrated their 100th year of incorporation. And not only 100 years of incorporation, of association, but they actually had to write to President McKinley to get permission to associate. Because when the Americans first came to Guam, they prohibited organizations from forming because they were fearful of, you know, all kinds of things happening. And it was a number of the young members who wrote to the president and reminded them that the Bill of Rights starts with the right of association. And they got a special charter from the president to incorporate, and they celebrated their 100th year. And as a civil society, that would be one. And I went to their meeting, and you would be very impressed that they conduct most of their meeting in Chamorro because they're trying to bring back the language. All of them are now proudly sporting the cultural ornamentation that we've revived. And our men are actually very proud of the fact that we are now wearing the wrap.
Woohoo! I love it.
Beautiful black ones with their shirt and their
Sinahis.
Yeah.
Biba.
Biba, no.
Thank you.
We
will pursue
you
them.
can get them, especially since they're the oldest association, nonprofit.
Absolutely.
On Guam, to get them as one of your members, and you know just about everybody in there. So.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will pursue. Our last one, and closing by our Vice Chair, Eddie Regis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's to commit to utilize collective leadership and navigation in confronting challenges and oppositions that go against common goals and aspirations. I think in my prior hat in an international environment, I go back to the motto of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And their motto is, war against one is war against all. And I think when you look collectively at the islands, and Secretary General Martel brought this to our attention yesterday, that when you look at, and when we had the State Department representative there yesterday, a lot of times Guam's position is filtered through because they represent us in national fora or international fora. But I think what Secretary General Martel pointed out yesterday was those nations, like the United States, has one vote. Whereas if we come together as an alliance of Pacific Islands, we can help influence policy through at least 12 votes. So I think the more and more we work together as collectively and through other forums within the Pacific Island region, I think collectively we will have a strong voice and make those changes that Zita had actually mentioned. So I see this as an opportunity and a way to navigate and establish our foothold in achieving some of the sustainable development goals. So, thank you.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just ask Andy George, who's been very much involved with us over the years and is with Kuzrai Conservation Organization and the Kuzrai civil society organization. Just please say a few words about the work that's being done in the region.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Honorable Speaker, Honorable Senator, members of the panel, all the colleagues that are here today. Sarah had asked for me to speak a little bit about the conservation and environmental efforts that are going on in the region. First of all, I introduced myself a while ago as the chairman of the Kushai Civil Society Organization. I must also say that I sit on the FANGO Board of Directors, and I also run a conservation NGO in the state of Kushai. The work we do work in partnership with a lot of conservation and environmental organizations across the region, basically to promote and to carry out activities in support of the Micronesia Challenge, which we are all part of. I can speak a little bit about a project that we, FSM, has recently completed. We call it the FSM for 10%. This project is basically setting aside 10% of the EEZ, FSM EEZ, as a non-commercial fishing zone. It went through all the state legislatures. The state government has endorsed it, and the national government has also endorsed the concept. So the 10% of our national waters, EEZ, is actually closed off. And commercial fishing is not allowed in there. And that's a success that we hope can be replicated in other parts of Micronesia. But Mr. Speaker talked about the shark sanctuary. I think that's another effort that shows collaborative and working together of the region to make sure that the conservation efforts are done across the region. The Marshall Islands, FSM, Palau, and Guam have all agreed to conserve and protect our sharks and other oceanic lives. But I'm very proud to be a part of the group. I think the civil society organizations will, in this group, with Payu-Ta taking the lead and with all the national liaison units, will work together to push forward agendas that are important for the civil society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andy. Micronesian Challenge. Who's not in Micronesian Challenge right now? Andy, do you know? Sorry? Who's not in Micronesia? Who's not in Micronesia Challenge? Who has not?
So the Micronesia Challenge has been endorsed by all the 5 Micronesian jurisdictions, including Guam, CNMI, FSM, Palau, and the Marshall Islands.
That's a big round.
Yeah. Perhaps I should say that the challenge calls for the 5 jurisdictions to put under effective management 30% of the marine resources and 20% of the terrestrial resources by 2020. That was a very ambitious goal. We knew from the beginning. We know we will not get there by 2020, but it is going to keep motivating us to work toward achieving it eventually. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah, did I answer?
Yes, thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, I'd be remiss not to acknowledge the presence of Oxfam. It's an international NGO, first time being here on Guam. And I'd like to ask Jane if she'd like to just make a comment. Jane?
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say I'd just like to say thank you very much for the welcome to the Micronesia Not-for-Profit Conference from the chair and from the board and to be able to sort of participate in these sessions. Oxfam is a global humanitarian development and advocacy organization. Traditionally, we've worked in the Southern Pacific and in Melanesia in the West. And we've long wanted to extend our partnerships and our work to our colleagues and organizations in the Northern Pacific. We welcome the opportunity to meet and form partnerships and relationships that we hope will help civil society unify across our Pacific in the same way that Secretary General from PIFTS and Forum Secretariat have talked about the governmental sort of alliances and the progress that has been able to be made with that kind of regional sort of input. We hope that by with Oxfam joining forces with both regional civil society bodies like Piango and with sort of sub-regional like Micronesia and across Polynesia and Melanesia, that we can bring our experience and our voice from sort of the global experience that we have to add and amplify, particularly around issues of climate change and citizen action and participation. Thank you.
Before we close, I would like to give an opportunity for Senator Jean Biscoli to make a presentation or at least to speak to you. As you may know, I've announced my retirement this year, and I'm very confident in my retirement because I know that I have a young person who's here who has the same kind of passion and concern about the environment and sustainability, and has been a champion of a number of pieces of legislation. I'd just like to have her speak before we...
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and Dunkaluna Sidos Maasi. Thank you so much to each and every one of you for your participation in the conference over the past few days, but more importantly, for your continued work on behalf of your organizations, on behalf of your islands, and collectively on behalf of our region and our world. We're very proud and privileged to welcome you here to the 34th Guam Legislature and to present some of just a small subset of the work that you've been doing. And we're very proud to be able to share with you some of the work that the legislature and our partners in the judiciary and throughout our island have been doing over the past few months and years and decades. One of the things that I'm certainly taking away from this discussion today is just, and this is something that we see throughout our work, is how civil society and our NGOs are really assisting us in filling the gaps between public and private sector. There's only so much that we can do. There's only so much that the business community can do. And there's so many challenges and so much need. And so I just want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your work and your dedication and your passion that we've heard as you've spoken about these different things. One of the things that Sam had mentioned that really resonated with me is how in the beginning of President Underwood's speech, he felt like he was coming from a disempowered position. And a lot of times as we approach our work, it's really challenging. Some of the work that we do with our youth, some of the work that we do with women and domestic violence, and all of these issues, it really tugs at the heartstrings and makes us feel like it's just a real uphill battle. But I'm really encouraged by the ideas of collective leadership and using the Blue Pacific strategy to empower our people, empower ourselves, and really wind up with a lot of hope and approaching these issues and challenges in a very resilient way and being able to address a lot of the sustainability goals that we've set out for ourselves. So I just want to thank you so much. Thank you so much, Auntie Sarah, for bringing this together again, as we've participated in these conferences in the past, but also I think it's just so important for us to have these discussions on the policy level and see what else can be done to continue this good work. So I want to thank the speaker and thank all of you very much for your participation. Tsutusmasi.
Yesterday, no, it was the day before yesterday, we had Island Leadership Day. And we all had counterparts. That's why I missed Wednesday's meeting. We had Island Leadership Day, and so each of us had a counterpart that was in high school or in middle school. And at the end of the conference, and at the end of the day, I thanked them for being with us during the day, and to challenge them that in this upcoming year, that I wanted all of them to apply to become members of the Youth Congress. For over 30 years, Guam has had a Youth Congress. And the Youth Congress have been very, very progressive. 30 years ago, they were some of members who have been members of the legislature introduced legislation like condoms being distributed in the high schools. 10 years ago, I had oversight over youth, and they passed a bill for LGBT civil union, which I introduced in the legislature and almost got killed. And this year they passed legislation banning plastics, and their oversight chair, who doesn't want to take credit for it, but she's introduced it, and I hope that she survives the introduction of the legislation. But the joke was, at the end of the day, when I challenged them to all become members of the Youth Congress, somebody walked up to her and said, "I hope that you're going to be a member of the Youth Congress next year." But no, we really are very proud of our young members and the future members that we're going to have. And so I'm hopeful. I know that the currents seem disempowering, but really seriously, there is quite a bit of hope. And so I want to acknowledge the work that everybody's been doing and all of you have been doing. So thank you again very much for the presentation today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of Payu-Ta, on behalf of our Micronesian NLUs, Piango, our brothers and sisters in the Pacific, we're very grateful. And again, sitting alongside PIFs and PIDF, which represent our Pacific leaders, is also been such an honor as well. And of course, having Jane from Oxfam join us, and Maury from the Pacific Youth Council, which is actually based in Suva, and just reconnecting with our brothers and sisters here in Guam and throughout our region has been a great honor and has been very inspiring. And having to be here with you, our legislators, our policymakers, for the last nearly 2 hours has also been, I think, consoling and encouraging to us as well. And we know that this is just the beginning of one of many discussions that we'll have in the future weeks and months. And Mr. Speaker, although you're saying you're retiring, I just doubt very seriously that you will retire, because I remember going to your retirement party when you stepped down from the judiciary, and I don't even think it was 30 days, and you were hot into many other things. So, of course, you know, we welcome you back to civil society and NGOs, which I know is your passion. We were just reflecting on the ride over about the work you did in the region with OPIR and Nuclear Free Pacific. So you did some groundbreaking work, and we know you still have all the passion and love for the people of Guam and the people of the Pacific. So just to let you know, it's not over till it's over, and we welcome you with open arms. I'd like to ask if we could stand for a prayer and ask our youth member, Maury, to lead us.
As Pacific Islanders, we're we value our spiritual practices. I also respect other religions, but I would like to lead us in a prayer in my faith, which is the Christian prayer. Please let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you that you have been with us. We have successfully completed our session with our respective leaders from Guam. Please bless our endeavors, be with us throughout our journeys, help us through our challenges, and bless us today as we leave so that we can make it back to our islands, those who have come to Guam. Amen. Thank you.